everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk, our podcast series produced and delivered to you by Hazel and Betty Ford. I'm your host, William C. Moyers. Thanks for joining us today for an intimate conversation with a mother who lost her son to addiction. Her name is Linda Morrison. Her son's name is Mike. She's written a memoir about her journey from addiction to hope to recovery to addiction to hope to recovery to addiction to fear and loss and grief, and standing up and speaking out and sharing her story to help others. Thank you, Linda, for joining us today from St. Paul, Minnesota.
Thank you, William. It's nice to be here. I appreciate you having me on and sharing Mike and my story.
Tell us a little bit about Mike and your story.
Well, Mike was our youngest son of three, and he had the whole package. He was smart, he was good looking, he had a killer smile and baby blue eyes that he used to his advantage. um, but he struggled with internally with anxiety, depression, never feeling he was ever good enough, always worried, and never feeling like he was normal. That's what he said. I don't feel normal. And I didn't really know what that meant. And he ended up doing, kids drink, they try some marijuana, but he ended up having some heroin and it took his anxiety away. And he said he felt normal. And that was the beginning of a 4-year journey, in and out of treatment centers, 3 times at Hazelton, several around the country. He did have a couple years of sobriety when he was in Colorado. He relocated to Carbondale, and had really good good time of sobriety there. And the town loved him. And when he left and came back for his last treatment and then passed away, it was really devastating for them, as it was for our family. Yeah, Mike was humorous and would just play tricks on us, but we just loved him so much. And he just could not see all the good that was in him.
He died in 2012. What happened?
Um, he went to Hazelton. And I mean, he had a fantastic time. Every time he went to treatment, he did well. I think because his peers understood him, the counselors got him. But I think inside there was just still the fear, and I think he was worried that we were disappointed in him. So he got out. We picked him up. We brought him back here. We dropped him off at a sober house where he was going to live, and give him a couple days to acclimate. And he was supposed to call me, and then the next morning, my doorbell rang and there were 2 police officers at my door. And they told me that Mike had died by suicide at a local motel and that he had left a note. And then the first of many, I'm sorry for your loss. So that's where the journey of after Mike died begins.
In your mind, as his mother, did he die from his addiction or did he die from a mental health condition?
Rob, I would say the latter. I think he just felt hopeless. I think he felt like he was a big disappointment, which he wasn't. We never, ever said that to him at all. And I think being 23, he just did not want to spend the rest of his life in recovery and having this burden on him. So I really think it maybe a little bit of combination of both, but I think the mental health was, and the guilt and the shame, because each relapse, it was, bigger and larger. And he just felt he couldn't do it anymore.
That guilt and shame are toxic, as you pointed out there. Did you, as a mom, also struggle with guilt and shame?
I think at the beginning I did. What could we have done differently? Was there anything that I did that pushed in this direction? But after I really understood after his first treatment center and the family programs, I really understood more about addiction, his addiction, and the impact it has on him and his families.
Yes, yes.
So that was really paramount for me and our family to really understand and not put that on us.
On that point, did Mike's struggles affect you and his father more or affect his brothers more, or is that a ridiculous question?
Well, in different ways. His brothers were angry with him. They didn't understand a substance abuse. They just wanted their brother back. And then when he had the continued relapses and the moving, I think it was just really hard on them because we just weren't together as a family. We were really a strong family. No, his dad loved him. His dad supported him, but his dad was the one that would ask Mike the hard questions and kind of push him a little bit. But no, we supported Mike and we didn't like his addiction, but we were supportive of him. We always were there for him. And we could call us anytime, day or night. And, I never said, no, don't call us, don't come home. I mean, we really tried to keep the doors of communication open with Mike.
I want to talk about your book, Dear Heroin, A Memoir of Goodbyes, in just a moment. But before we get there, I was struck in reading the book and in your website how you specifically call out the number of treatments that Mike was in. I think it was 8, and the number of months of sobriety that he experienced, which I think you said was 23 months. It causes me to think about this, and I've worked for Hazelden and Betty Ford for many decades, and I'm an alum from Hazelden in 1989, although I did not stay sober out of my experience there. And so I've known a lot of people like your son, and I've known a lot of families like yours. And I want to ask you a hard question. It's a hard question for me, and it may be a hard question for you based on these numbers, but 8 treatment centers. What is your belief about the effectiveness of treatment?
Going to treatment is helpful. I believe that it gets them sober. It gets them community. It gets them peers. Families are able to, through the family programs, get together, talk about issues with Mike and his dad and I. And it's not, I guess I know others who've had lots of treatments also. And I think this drug of choice, heroin, is hard. It's hard to kick. It's hard to beat. And then you add on the mental health issues and where all those bad feelings go away when he uses is a real big draw, to feel what he would call normal.
You also call out those 23 months of sobriety. Why is it important for you to identify the actual number of months that he had as a sober young man?
Because he did so well during those months. It was 9 months and then I believe 14 months. He had a short, maybe 3 weeks in between time. But he was in Colorado, he was in Carbondale, and when he was not using and he was in recovery, he was just a man on fire. He was going to meetings and he was sponsoring others and he was sharing his story and he was working and he was living the life he wanted to live. And so, then he fell, but then he got back up and then he had again the 14 months. And I don't know why at that January of 2012, what happened, something happened and he used and he just couldn't recover from that. I don't know what that was or why, but it was just that downhill slide from there. The last few months of his life were really very difficult on our family and very difficult on him and his friends.
I often say that when people don't know why the illness comes back, I explain it as saying the illness just comes back in the same way that cancer comes back for some cancer patients or diabetes comes back for your son. Based on what I've read, it had a particularly heinous and virulent strain of the illness of addiction with mental health issues challenging that too. So it is what it is in that regard. We don't know why these things happen, but it happened to your son and it happened to your family. I find it really enlightening, though, that you did identify those 23 months as a gift of sobriety, because he did have some good times in there, as you pointed out.
Yes. Yeah, he did. He really did. And like I said, he lived those sober days and months well.
Yes.
And he impacted so many people in that community. They told me, and I say in the book, if he had run for mayor, he would have won just because of the impact that he had there. Not just being sober, but where he worked, he just did everything with gusto.
Mm-hmm. Linda, how in those 12, now 13 years since your son died, how have you recovered?
Well, I would say the first year I was pretty numb. And you're just kind of going through the motions of, burying him and doing all that paperwork and all the things you have to. The second year was when I really grieved, when that was my hardest year, was the second year. Just going through, I think my emotions were thawing out and that I was starting to deal with those emotions. And so that was the hardest year. Um, and then each year after that, it got a little better. And now, going on 11 years later, I feel like I have a full life. Yes, I miss Mike. I wish he were here. I mean, our family is expanded, and he would be an uncle, and he would be fabulous. But I think that we understand why he couldn't stay, and that we just miss him, but I know he's in a better place. I know he's at peace and he's not struggling. And in his note, he told us, live your lives. I had a great childhood. I had a great life. You guys lived your lives. Don't continue and mourn for me. Live. And that's what we choose to do, is to honor that.
Mm. And part of living your life has been writing this memoir, Dear Heroin, a Memoir of Goodbyes. What motivated you to write the book?
Well, I never really intended to write a book. Mike had told me when he was sober and in Carbondale, he said, Mom, if anything ever happens to me, I want you to tell my story. And I said, yeah, okay. He goes, no, Mom, really, I mean that. And I said, okay, I will. Um, and about a year after Mike died, a friend of his who works in a treatment center invited me to speak. And I went and shared the story. And so that's how I thought I was going to honor his wishes to share his story. But the more I shared, the more people would say, you need to write about this. You need to write about this. And I'd say, no, 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 I'm not really a writer. And no, I don't know. One thing led to another. And I thought, well, maybe. And I started taking classes. There's a literary center here in Minnesota called The Loft. I started classes there and met up with a couple fabulous instructors who just really helped me with my manuscript and got me as far as I could till I found a publisher. So, but it was healing for me as well to write this, because I could write it down. And I mean, I would sit here sometimes and be typing on my computer crying. And, especially the hard stories, the hard times. And I would just get up, save it, and walk away, come back and keep looking away at it until I was to a place where I felt I was strong enough and it wasn't as hard and to write.
As you said, you wrote it to tell Mike's story. You wrote it as part of your process, but you wrote it for other people as well. And I'm wondering if you would please read, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I am, I guess, read the dedication to the book, because I had actually read it and was struck by it, and I have it here printed out, but I know that hearing it from you will mean a lot to our viewers and our listeners. So if you would read the dedication.
I will. This book is dedicated to my son, Michael Thomas, a great warrior who lost his battle with addiction. To the thousands of warriors who have lost their battles, and those who are still in the heat of this conflict. To all the loving families who have fought valiantly beside their sons and daughters, their siblings, their spouses, parents, grandparents, or friends. and all the families currently on the front line of this devastating disease. I have been where you are. I know your pain, your sorrow, your losses. I stand beside you, not knowing how or when the tide may turn in your favor or of your loved one. I want you to know you are not alone.
I want you to know that you are not alone. Why is that so important for families and for your readers?
Because when you're walking through this, you feel like you're alone. You feel like nobody understands, nobody gets it. You get all sorts of advice from family and friends who don't know, they don't understand. And it's lonely. I mean, even, that's why the treatment centers were good. The family program was so good for us because we bonded, we were together, and we knew we were not alone. They got your story. If I shared something about a sleepless night or money being taken, you could hear and see, yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's a bonded, there's a camaraderie there.
Mm.
And you need that when you're walking through this. You need people to understand, to get it with you, to come alongside of you, put their arms around you and say, I'm walking with you.
What's been the response, Linda, to you sharing your story so openly as you have in the book and in the way that you have out in the public arena where you carry the message? What kind of response do you get?
It's been very moving for me. People are very touched. They're touched by the openness and honesty that I've shared the book with. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't want to say things that really weren't true, but it resonates with people. They get it. And part of it is families. They're so happy to hear that. Yeah, maybe I had the worst case scenario, but yet I can still move forward. But for them, they're still walking in this, and they have hope. They can get garnered hope from this, and maybe for them, they will have a different outcome. They'll have the recovery and the beautiful family togetherness. And that's what I would hope for everybody. But it doesn't always happen. And so I want to be there for those who have that other scenario like me, but that your life does continue and you can live, as they say, happy, joyous, and free. And so, yeah,
Linda, what would be your message today to other parents who are struggling with the same things that you've experienced?
I would say as a family to hold on to each other, um, to get help, to surround yourself with others who've been there. Um, I didn't talk about it, but my faith and my higher power has been um, helpful with for me. Um, and that you need something greater than yourself, however you identify that, to walk this journey. But I think being open and honest, sharing your story, not being shamed. I mean, there's a there's many avenues that to share and just support people. People call me. I have some neighbors who've lost children, and I'm supporting them. Just hearing their stories, just listening. So, yeah, talk to somebody. Get yourself into some sort of a program that can help you to understand what your loved one's going through.
We've only got a couple of minutes left. I've got two questions. One is about the red dragonfly. Can you explain that?
Yeah. We have a little pond by our house, and I was out there one day and I was just thinking about just kind of our journey. This was probably a summer or two after Mike had died. And it was beautiful. It's a summer day. And I just was sitting there and I saw the corner of my eye, some movement, and I looked and there was a red dragonfly. And it just sat there. And it was literally looking at me. And I looked at it, and we just sat there for a few seconds. And then it kind of fluttered away. But I did a little research, and in the Native American community, when dragonflies appear, that's your loved one. And sometimes it's been a tragic death is when they show up. But since then, I've had a lot of dragonflies just show up. one on my thumb or one following me. So I kind of think maybe it's Mike just kind of keeping tabs on his mom.
And red dragonflies are rare anyway, even though we have a lot of them in the upper Midwest or in other places. A red one is not, dragonflies in general are around, but red ones are unusual.
Yes. And that was the one and only time I've ever seen a red one here. So
Last question before we go. I was struck in your book by the juxtaposition between sorrow and grief and gratitude and hope. And I can't help but wonder, do you go back and forth all these years after Mike's death? Do you go back between sorrow and grief and gratitude and hope, or are you more in the gratitude and hope side of this journey?
it kind of goes in cycles. Around his birthday, death day, I feel the sadness. I feel the loss. I miss him. But other times I am hopeful. I am joyful with that. Because again, like I said, Mike wouldn't want me to continue to grieve for him. But I feel like I have worked hard enough and long enough in this journey that I can have a good, happy life. And my oldest son has gone on to get married and have kids, and I'm happy for them. And we just enjoy our family times with them, and his other brother's married. So life can move forward, and it's a process. And I think it's something that you do have to work at. But, there'll always be a heart-shaped hole where Mike would be. And we think about him at Christmas or all the holidays or birthdays, and we just honor his memory and share stories. And, that's how our family kind of is healed.
And we honor you today, Linda Morrison, for bringing your story of loss and grief and gratitude and hope to our viewers and our listeners. The book is called Dear Heroin, a Memoir of Goodbyes by Linda Morrison. We thank you for sharing yourself and your family's journey with us today, Linda.
Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure. And again, I love talking about Mike and sharing our story. So thank you. I appreciate it a lot.
You're welcome. Thank you. And thanks to all of you for tuning in, as Linda so eloquently and obviously spoke about. The tragedy of addiction is a tragedy, but from adversity can come the opportunity to heal and to carry the message as she has so effectively done. We hope that you will find inspiration in today, and if you or a loved one is struggling, know that there is hope, there is opportunity out there. It starts with asking for it. Thanks for joining us today. We hope to see you again soon on this edition of Let's Talk.